Like, wow, this seems amazing. This is the last element of the festival, the Global LGBTQIA plus everybody else festival. Some people tell me I need to shorten that name, but I think it's funny really long like that. There's a drag queen, I forget what her name is, who said she calls it LGBTQ LMNOP. And, yeah, and I think it's important or fruitful to talk about how this work really relates to the rainbow community, the um, LGBT community. Let me see if I can get everybody who's on the panel up here. And so we
Oh,
have a
panel discussion.
few
That'd be great.
panelists.
No, I thought,
I'm sorry.
fine. I'm glad to.
Okay, I'm hearing Tony's voice. I'm not sure if he wants us to hear that. Tony, is there something you want to say to us?
No, I'm sorry. I forgot I was off mute.
Okay, that's cool. So let me see who, Fritha, I'm going to add you because you're here as well. And Spotlight, and then Connor. Where is Connor? Where are you located? I don't see you.
He's gone for a sip of
Connor
water.
went to the loo.
Oh, he went to the bathroom? Okay, well then when he gets back, I guess
He
he'll
said he went to get some water.
he went to get some more. So he's not here. He turned off his camera completely. I just don't see him.
He's there.
Yes,
I
okay.
mean,
Is there
his
something you
his
could
square is
spotlight?
there. He's not there.
If you look in the participants list, you can find him there.
His
Yeah, okay.
microphone is looming in his studio, but there is nobody behind it.
That's what's going on. You know why? So because of that, I'll try. I can add a spotlight. Let's see what happens. Oh, there,
There you go.
Yeah,
spotlight.
there you
Okay,
go.
yeah, thank you. All right, there he is. Now he's back. Yeah. Years ago, some of you know, some of you don't. I was asked to come to Sage LGBT Elder Centers because there were no programs that dealt with the body that were successful. They even had drag queen performances where people got to walk the runway, but that just didn't have the depth, I think, to attract the population over any kind of time. But people weren't taking the yoga classes or the other kinds of classes. So where I was teaching at Equinox, where Feldenkrais was successful, and they said, "Do you have anything that would work with LGBT elders?" And Equinox said, "Yes, we definitely do." And they sent me down there, and the class really picked up and boomed. And in fact, Connor has actually taught there. Remember teaching at Sage? Yeah, really a wonderful community. And people connected in a way that was just very beautiful. And then it grew. I asked them to add another class, and then I thought we could do a festival around it. We bring in other teachers. And then the festival has grown and grown and grown up until the place where it is now, where we had over a dozen countries represented. We were able to do something all the way around the world, which is kind of difficult for me staying up for 24 hours. I took a couple of naps here and there. That was something. But I think that this work really is important, well, for everybody, but particularly for marginalized communities and also for people in the rainbow community who have been told that our sensations are wrong, who we're attracted to is incorrect, in the trans community, how we identify ourselves, what we're feeling is wrong. We're told no, 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 you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, all the way through, particularly for the elder community, but others, even I'm a young elder. I'd call myself that. I went through that, and to find a method where where the answers or the arbiter of that which is correct is not something that's imposed from the outside, but comes from the inside. That teachers, instead of standing up on high and telling us this is correct and that's incorrect, it's an invitation to explore, and whatever you find for yourself, you find what makes sense for you as you go through. I mean, there's certain rules that come through, but that I think is a major reason why the work has resonated so much with LGBT elders. In addition, just the whole paradigm of a teacher not doing that. I went through, I think all of us had athletic training where we had somebody who was on the outside saying, this is correct and you must do it. And you are aspiring to be something that you're not right now. Your downward facing dog is just not good enough, or you're not doing 100 correctly, or you need to do more push-ups. There's none of that in this method. And I think that's really rich and embracing. And so I'm thrilled that that has come forth, and I hope that can maybe start a conversation to others who are self-identified queer people, and in terms of how this work works. And so I'd like to open up the floor to anybody else who's here. Who
Frederick, do you want Maggie on this? Is Maggie Burrows is here too. Do you want to put her on?
Oh, hello. Thank you. Good morning. Let me, if I have not slept much this week.
I figured it's a lot of faces, so I just wanted to make sure you
Yeah,
knew.
thank you very much. I have not slept much this week, and so if I forget to like put myself up there, then let me, just remind me that I'm doing something, whatever. I don't. Yeah, here's Maggie.
I'm very happy to be supportive and to join in the panel, but I don't identify as queer, just so you know.
Okay, all righty. So I'm gonna.
That's why people are on the panel. Then I don't fit. Otherwise, I'm very happy to be there.
Okay, cool. All righty. Well, how about if you jump in if you want to? All right.
Yeah.
So, so what about the others of you in terms of working with the queer community? I know that Margaret in Australia, you've had some experience with that, and you're also doing it against a backdrop of a very different country than what we have here, as we discussed the other day. Do you care to share any of your experiences?
I guess I haven't worked, well, let me think. My first experience of teaching, particularly with a group of the rainbow community, was at ACON, which is an organization that developed during the AIDS crisis, and has since then become a broader inclusive, health supportive organization for our community. So I taught mainly all of the staff, of whom there are quite a few. At the time, I was focusing on how to sit comfortably while you're working. And so we did a lot of sitting in the office lessons. But the word kind of expanded, I guess. And I don't know if we specifically named the kind of demographic that we were looking for, but it's trickled in, and people came to me, and still do, from that community, feeling safe and thankful for that embodiment experience, which I've called embodiment in pride. So I did have a woman who is a speech therapist, and she spent many years referring people who were transitioning to me. She was working with their voice, but they were very uncomfortable in their experience of how they felt they were representing themselves in terms of gender and what the kind of stereotypes of that might be. So what we did was, we found out what they were comfortable with, but we also explored a kind of neutrality that wasn't kind of loaded with expectations of how they could move. And that was very freeing for them and very enlightening. What else can I say? What was your question?
No, I forget my question at the moment. I just wanted to speak about your experience with it. You and I talked the other day about a trans woman who skeletally had come into the world built like me, and then was looking to navigate being a female in society with my skeleton, or a skeleton that was like mine, and how beautiful it was, since nobody had taught her how to navigate space in a way that she felt comfortable in her femininity, because her skeleton just wasn't designed to do that, and nobody had taught her how. And so to be able to teach her how to go from seated to standing, where it was not this abrupt, still masculine way of standing up. Instead, it was elegantly pouring herself forward, so that she poured her weight forward, and there were tears in her eyes. It was really quite amazing. Also, the person who organized the event, who didn't like me very much. I'll just say it. She just didn't like me very much for whatever reason. Even she was blown away by how this work, which I think could really make tremendous inroads in the trans community, how this work had created that kind of freedom and ownership of someone in their body for whom that had been really problematic. And so, yes, yeah. So, yeah, I share that with you. So yes, I love it. How about if we talk about to some others? Larry, you've done some work with the queer community, is that right? Or yes or no? Or well, you've been. I mean, you were out as an educational director. I think you're the only out educational director. Probably is that true? I'm not sure. In terms of the Feldenkrais community coming forward.
Well, I'm not going to out anybody today. So if you're here for that, you're here for the wrong reason. No, I do remember years ago. I mean, this is maybe 20 years ago. Late at night, one night, we sat down and thought, well, could we do an all gay training? And we could have, and we still can. And that's all I'll say on the subject for now. You know, no, I can think of working with trans people and working with other people, but I haven't expressly done a class in the gay community.
Uh, I think why would people be drawn? I have ideas on it. Why would people be drawn to doing an all gay training? What do you
Oh, it was just a late night conversation of like, well, wouldn't it be fun? Because then, I mean, it was just like kind of making a safe space, but just realizing that we could do it,
huh.
you know? But I want to tell a story, which is not answering your question, but it's a story. So during the Amherst training, during the second year of the training, we had a party and a variety show. And Sheila Manley and Alan Questel were the MCs. So Sheila was the only Black woman in our training, and she cooked for Moshe, as I did. And they were on the stage, and Alan was being his normal, funny self. And at some point, like, Sheila got kind of faux annoyed and said, well, you're cracking all these jokes. What does that make me, the straight man? And I was in the front row, and I was a few seats over from Moshe, and I just walked up on stage and tapped her on the shoulder and said, what does that make me? And everybody cracked up except for Moshe. And he leaned over to Anat, who was sitting next to him, and said, why are people laughing?
Wow.
And I knew Moshe fairly well because I had cooked for him some, and he knew who I was. And later we had a conversation about it, and he was like, well, you just don't seem gay, which I have been accused of at other times. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And so we actually had a conversation about that. So this would be 1981, in August of 1981. It may be the only conversation Moshe had, probably not, but he was definitely of a different generation. He was not at all judgmental, about it. I mean, he had his stereotypes, and it was open. It was almost kind of academic in a way, but I did get to talk to him about that. And that was the only thing on my agenda for today. I just wanted to tell that story because no one else could tell it. But it was kind of a sweet moment. But it also shows, like, the prejudices. Well, you know what? Actually, I'm going to tell another story. The
Please.
prejudices in the community. So I am a leper, which in Feldenkrais Schjang, those of you outside of the community, that means I joined the training late. This is a term that Moshe used. I'm not self-naming, but anyways, I joined the big group in the second year, 1981. And the year before that, the winter between the two first years or summers of the training, I did a makeup segment in Southern California. Anyways, at the beginning of the second year of the training, before the training began, we had announcements. So people would get up and they'd take the microphone and they would make class announcements, African dance class, whatever. So second week of the training, I got up and I said, "Hi, my name's Larry. Most of you don't know me, but I'd like to organize a carpool to Boston in a couple of weeks because it's lesbian and gay pride." And I thought, I probably am not the only person who wants to go. There's 236 people here. And I said lesbian and gay 3 times because I just didn't think people would hear it the first time. And then at the end, I said, "And if you don't want to be seen talking to a known homosexual, I posted my phone number up on the board in the back, and you could just give me a ring." But that was like, I'd never come out to 230 some people at the same time. Most people were incredibly great. One person was a total dick, just to me in general. So, maybe he just didn't like me, Frederick, like that could happen. But I was actually pleasantly surprised by how supportive that group was and how supportive the community has been.
Mhm. Well, certainly this community has been incredibly supportive of all this stuff that I've done, coming forward. The Feldenkrais community I speak of. Do you by any chance recall anything else that Moshe Feldenkrais talked about when it came to homosexuality? I know that he talks about sexuality a lot, but this is the first time I am hearing that he even knew what homosexuality was. And
I want to hear the script of what he said to you. Did you record what he said?
Yeah, on my time machine? I don't know. No, I didn't have a phone at the time, No, I mean, I told him that what I said is that I thought that was a very stereotypical point of view. And some, like in any category, some people live up to the stereotype, right? But that doesn't define the community. And, we talked about that. And I think we talked about, well, Maggie, you know me, Margaret. So I mean, I was talking about it from perspective of, we didn't say gender identity. And I was really coming from more of a politically feminist perspective. As a man, I say that with all due respect. But my overall sense was Moshe was really curious because I don't think anybody had said these things to him about, masculinity and femininity and sexuality, and that gay people fit the whole spectrum. And I told him I wasn't the only gay person in the training, and that was like, he really had to stop and think about that. So
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah. I look at the changes that have taken place that have enabled something like this to be this festival. I recall when we talk about 1981, when I first went to college, 1976, 1977. I went to a pretty open, a pretty liberal school, liberal arts school. That certainly was not considered, it wasn't tied up in religions that would, that would disparage gay rights and all that. And so they spoke what, a very the ideas of the college were progressive as I saw it. Yet I found that when I went to the Gay People's Alliance meetings, that the year before, people who were in the community were lying to their roommates about why they were not, what they were doing on Tuesday night at 7:30 when the weekly meetings were, so they would not be discovered. Sort of like what you were talking about. If people don't want to be seen with a known homosexual, they can call you. That happened in 1976, and then that changed a bit. And then I remember going back right after graduation to a Gay People's Alliance meeting, and the topic of conversation was not stuff like about how do you come out to your parents, or what do you tell your roommates so they're not suspicious. The topic of conversation was, okay, as educated young rainbow community people, what is our responsibilities upon graduation? Do we work in the gay community to create institutions that are gay positive, or do we work in the overall community as beacons of light, as out gay people, to change the culture from that perspective? And that was the topic of conversation. I said, well, this is incredibly radical. Talk about a shift over the course of 5 years. People hiding to people saying, okay, how do I not only hide, but how do I not hide? How do I stand up forward? And how do I completely leave in the rearview mirror the idea of living my life in such a way that I further the culture as it now is? But instead, how do I create the culture that I want future generations to live in? And I was really blown away by that. And maybe that sensibility is what created my idea of being able to do this festival. So, yeah, my niece Janelle, who's in the background, who invited me to invite Maggie up to the panel. Janelle and I have been having some challenges because she thought that and everybody else was just too cumbersome, and I think it's funny and and inclusive. By the way, I've had some people tell me that this festival is not inclusive enough, which I find astounding. But people have said that I'm just not inclusive enough. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Unless everybody else will be like, are you looking for, I don't know, orangutans? What are you talking about? Everybody's invited. And I thought I put Maggie on the spot again. I keep doing that as somebody who does not identify as a member of the queer community, but stepped forward and wanted to be here. I know you have a very unique upbringing that enabled you to take a look at people in the queer community and not have a traditional sense around that. Do you want to speak to why you wanted to be here as part of this as a host, as in everybody else?
I'll do my best.
Sure, thank you. I know you've been working all day.
Well, I grew up in a town that's notorious in the UK for being a haven for gay people. And the reason I grew up there is because my grandfather was gay. And at a time when you could be put in prison for being caught in any kind of gay activity. And that meant that my grandmother, who was married to, was constantly afraid that he wouldn't come home, that he would go out cruising and he wouldn't come home. And my mother told me about this fairly early on. And my mother was a very, very clever, engaged, wise woman, I feel. And so she told me with sort of some humor that my grandmother had said to her eventually that her father was one of those daisies. Because she wasn't familiar with the terminology, and why not? But when I was very small, I, without really knowing that the world could be anywhere else, spent a lot of my Sundays with my grandfather and my younger sister in cafes that entirely consisted of gay men. And I now know that he took us to play in a playground that was right next to a gay cruising area. So I realized with hindsight that he was leaving us in the playground and going to find partners. So yes, Margaret, you laugh. I laugh now. The playground is called Peter Pan's Playground.
Okay.
But so in my mother's house, there were a lot of books written by gay authors, basically. So I was a huge James Baldwin fan, a huge Mary Renault fan. I read Radcliffe Hall. The Well of Loneliness is a very depressing book. I do not recommend it. You know, but so basically, but my mother was very open and interested in everybody of every kind. My mother didn't have those kinds of prejudices built in. So that was the kind of house I grew up in. And then I grew up in a town where there were lots of gay bars. It was very, very relaxed. And that meant, I'm sure, that it became a haven for trans people as well. And I teach voice. So 25 or so years ago, a group of mainly male to female trans women asked me if I would teach them about voice. And so I put together a program to help people find the voice that they felt fitted with their nature and deal with the fact that what often happened, and you know where I am concerned at the moment, I'm concerned that people are making trouble where there wasn't trouble before, or exaggerating trouble that might be quite small, but if you then focus on it, you can make it quite big. You know, what was happening was that people were very comfortable with greeting the feminine side of these people when they met them. And then if they heard them on the phone, they could hear that big male larynx and they would say, Mister, and then they would be hurt. But that's a biological reality around which one doesn't have a lot of control. And so I came up with all the vocal training techniques I could come up with that would help people. And there was only one female to male trans man there. Everybody else was transiting in the other direction and dealing with this big, you know, notoriously Adam's apple because the larynx is so big. But I had a very interesting realization. I realized that they would never do enough practice. Really change your voice so that it was spontaneously and naturally different requires a lot of practice. Singers do that because they want to sing. Everybody else is going to want something simpler and quicker. And so it was a fascinating thing. And I wrote an article about it and I gave them lots of notes, and I haven't had a lot of feedback since. It wasn't long after that I moved to London. But yes, it was a fascinating experience. And it's something I would still happily do if anyone asked me to do it. But I now strongly emphasize how important practice is if you're going to change something that fundamental so that it really works.
Thank you.
And can we have access to the article?
Yes, I think so. You know, I wrote it so long ago, Margaret, that it's doing things all on the internet and doing things online, but I photocopied it, so I do have it. So I will make a note and send it to anyone who wants it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we had an issue with another wonderful voice teacher who is a cisgender. For those of you who aren't familiar with that term, there's transgender and then there's cisgender. For people who are their sense of themselves is in alignment with their biology. He's a gay man, and he is a voice teacher. Robert Sassouma is his name, and he came to to Sage, to help with voice for the reasons you were talking about. People who were mostly trans women who still had a larynx and a deep voice. And he said he could work with people that way. But things have changed so much that in the trans community, there's such a sense of whatever the sense is that they refused to work with him. And they said, we will not work with a cisgender male. And he's like, well, wait a minute, I'm a wonderful voice teacher, and this is something I think would be great to do.
Really wonderful.
He's absolutely, truly wonderful. And he's also a gay man. He said, look, I'm trans adjacent, maybe. I don't know what to call it. But they refused to work with him. I also have had some challenges at the LGBT Center. I emphasize T because I am such a big, strong, male presenting man. And some trans people there assumed that I was the enemy. In fact, in the one in the Bronx where I went in, I'm also very light skinned, and that's mostly a darker skinned population there. They more than once I've been asked if I was in the right place, and I'm like, "Hello, yeah, are they not? Are you in the right? Are you a member of the LGBTQ community? Things like that." And also clipping the language as opposed to using a texture that would suggest that I was born in Harlem. That I'm a black man born in Harlem. It was very much like, talking to somebody who was on the other side in multiple spheres. And then, I came through and, that they get along with me now. But that was a challenge. It's interesting. We have two panelists we have not heard from. One is somebody, well, you just heard him teach. We did a program a while back, a multi-generational program, where we had somebody in their 20s. He's now 33. But somebody in their 20s, somebody in their 40s. He was horrified for people to know that he was in his 40s. He had just turned 40. Somebody in their 60s, me, and then somebody in their 80s addressing questions pertaining to the gay community, like the relationship to marriage, the relationship to HIV, the relationship to polyamory, and the relationship to dealing with a homophobic society. And it was quite interesting hearing Connor talk. And he's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? I just got there and I'm me. And I was like, that was not my experience when I was your age. And Connor, I'd love to hear, before we move on to Fritha, I'd love to hear about you. Well, you're also very much in the dance community. You're in so many different communities. I don't even know what to say. If I, we don't have to list all the different things on your resume, but you kind of have done and do everything. But I'd love to hear from you on this subject of um, uh, queer people and Feldenkrais method and your thoughts.
Well, here's what I have to say right now. First, it's awesome to hear these various stories of back in the day. No, I never met Moshe or worked with him directly. And so, it's very popular to disparage past generations' way of being, I think, for my generation and the generations younger than me. Most generously, I'd say out of a desire to progress more quickly and to move into new ways of thinking about things, but less generously in a defensive sort of anti-history mode. So I love hearing the stories and I love hearing what happened to get to where we are now. And I think it informs us a lot about how we might move forward and how we might approach what is similar between all of us of different ages and different backgrounds. My experience, and I did an interview with an Australian podcast a year or two ago about dance and Feldenkrais, where I talked about the unity that I feel in my identity, in being a dancer and being a Feldenkrais practitioner, in terms of the body as a way of knowing the world and how our embodiment is not just a way of receiving information, but also a way of I don't know. It's I don't know. I have to write a thesis or paper about this, but it's a way of knowing. It's a way that we know what the world is and who we are in it, and we take the ecosystem of sensations that we live with and we make decisions about how to behave and how to relate to each other. And that's, I think, what being a big homo is about too. And the gay community is also a community that has a deep tie to those sensations, the ecology of knowing ourselves through sensation, through desire. And that's why there's so many gay people that are drawn to the Feldenkrais method, I think, because it really validates those internal strategies of knowing ourselves. And I don't know what Moshe would think about that, but I think he would probably, I would like to think he'd be very proud that his method speaks to the margins of our society in such a beautiful way. And I, as somewhat of an activist myself around gender and race and dancing and embodiment, think of Toni Morrison, who said that we can stand on the margin and claim it as a new center. And we don't have to move towards the center. We don't have to move towards the norm. We can and I think we can use Feldenkrais and we can use the embodiment practices that it contains within it and that it speaks to claim our own pride, our own space, our own territory, and our own center, even if we right now live on the margins and may increasingly be pushed to the margins by our governments, by our societies, that these are tools to claim our freedom, to know freedom. Okay, I've gone on, but that's what I have to say.
Great, that's great. Thank you.
I love that you said the word desire, Connor. Oh, sorry, Severin, you wanted to say something. No, go ahead, please.
No, I was just agreeing a lot with what Connor said. That was like yes. Don't want to say anything, but thank you, Larry.
Well, what I love that you said, Connor. I'm going to pick one word out of it because it resonates with me, and you said desire, and I think that resonates with Moshe. Moshe I think he was speaking back to Sigmund Freud all the time. He said in Amherst that, he was going to be more famous than Sigmund Freud. Right? I mean, that was his own perspective. But I think in Feldenkrais, we talk about intention, and intention is a very clinical white coat way to say desire. Right? Because it's about wanting what isn't here yet. Right? It's about, are we going to be Aristotelian about it? It's about final cause, right? It's about the cause is in the future. And it's also, in the Freudian sense, about desire. It's not just an intellectual idea, but it's a felt sense. We desire, it drives us as human beings. And I like that you use that word because I think maybe one of the things that we can bring to the method, not just us, but is the sense that, I'm looking at the book, but I'm not going to reach over and grab it. Body and Mature Behavior, a study of sex, anxiety, gravity, and learning, or sexuality, or, that the work is as much about enjoyment as it is about efficiency. Right? And enjoyment, pleasure is a radical notion. As a Feldenkrais teacher, if I come and say to somebody, we are built to move easily and pleasurably, I think that's one of the most radical things you could say to anybody. And I think if as people of desire, as people where, that when we talk about the dreams that people have and their unavowed dreams, that also has to do with desire and how it drives us. And our understanding of intentionality about the cause for doing something, not being in the past, not cause and effect, but being in the future. That has to do with something. And it's also an emotional fact. It's not just a physical or mental fact. I watched this YouTube video of a psychologist who was talking about how in society we don't appreciate psychological health and we're just focused on the health of the body. And he talked about emotions the whole time. And I was thinking, dude, emotions are not just in your head, right? And I think that that's something that we have to perhaps, that I think that has to do with the future of the work and what I would desire to see about how we work with people. So I thought that was a wonderfully radical in terms of like going to the root of the matter statement, Connor. So thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you. I want to make sure that the other panelist has a chance to say whatever is on her mind. And this is Fritha Pengelly, who is in Massachusetts. And Fritha, you are now, you're now open. What would you like to say some things about this subject matter?
I feel like I go in so many different directions. I'm loving hearing everybody's stories. I'm also really curious to hear from the participants what they've been experiencing being in their bodies throughout this week. I was just listening to a podcast about embodiment, and one of the people speaking talked about the body as a disruptor. I'm just very much aware of how being in our bodies is so important to so many things, but I think this practice really allows us to find that space, to be grounded, to be connected to our own wisdom, our own self-knowing. I'll speak for myself as a dancer and a queer person, right? I've gone through a major transformation in the last year. I feel like I came back to my body in a way that I thought I was. I've been a dancer since I was 5. Like, I've been practicing being in my body for so long. And so I just am so excited that we're all here, that everybody is showing up and practicing as Maggie was suggesting, right? We have to practice to really sort of embody these changes that we want to have for ourselves. And it also, what Larry was saying and Connor was saying, that, we think of the quote from Moshe, knowing oneself is the most important thing a human being can do. And I think we really need to do that right now to support each other, to be, in safe spaces with each other and build community. As people have been doing for so long, but to move forward in these times. So that's what I have to say in this moment in response to what everybody said.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I think that some people have raised their hand. How about to keep it in order? If you wanted to ask questions of the panel, or you have something you'd like to say, if you do that, I see Ellen has raised her hand. Ellen, I'm going to unmute you here, and I'm going to ask you to unmute. There you go.
Thank you. This is a fascinating panel. I think it's moving forward really important to keep whether the everybody part is, and it's too long, but to keep the LGBTQ, etc., welcoming place for all the reasons we've talked. I think that's really important. As a I said this in another class, I consider myself a participant, because, or a practitioner, because I practice Feldenkrais. The rest of you are teachers. Okay, I don't know where that came from, but I always get confused. So anyway, as a person who does Feldenkrais, I live on the west coast of Canada in a small city, which is the capital of our province, and it's absolutely full of older dykes / lesbians. I've been out for 52 years, longer than some of you have been alive. And so I like dyke. I don't actually use queer. I used rainbow community because I like that in my comment. But because I came out in the lesbian feminist movement in the early 70s, that is still who I am. Now, I know a lot of women who've been in couples 40 years or more here in this town. We just live our lives. We just go about things. There are no queer, rainbow, gay, lesbian spaces in this town anymore. They don't exist. There are social circles, and my friends know that I practice Feldenkrais. There are, I think, 2 teachers in here, so I do all my practicing online, recorded or live. So I'm just wondering about opening that. Some of you were talking about how this attracts that large community. That's not my experience, because there is no place to be attracted to except online. And at my age, so I'm 71 now, and as you 3 of you who have had me in your classes when you're teaching, practicing, you know, I have, various, at 71, we have things that, we have injuries, we have things wearing out, we have arthritis in our spine, et cetera, And so the people who I know, many of whom are at least 5 years older than me, they're really dealing much more with their fucking breakdown of their body, and that is much more of a concern than their identities. That has become their identity. And I think there's a space for this work where going to the gym and doing more reps of whatever to build your osteoporotic bones is not meeting people's needs. So I'm just kind of putting that out there as a question of how can I engage my friends in this space? Because I think it's useful for our old bodies, our aging bodies that are wearing out.
Can I comment on that? I've just, I think I mentioned it to you last night or whenever I was speaking. I've just come from a teaching at a rainbow queer retreat, and some of the people there had never experienced Feldenkrais before. And after the first session that I did, which was a breath lesson, I had all these different people coming up to me sneakily. They didn't want to reveal things to the bigger world, even though it was a safe and beautiful space, and basically revealing that they held trauma in their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of speak on that now, the body keeps the score, and indeed it does. And so I actually ended up giving some private sessions to people. And it was about, and I'm out and proud older dyke too, by the way, but some of them were younger, and they had different cultural kind of backgrounds that and not necessarily hanging around in the queer community that much. Some of them were new to it, and they were really held fear in their bodies. And Feldenkrais talks about this. If you're a child, I'm just trying to remember, Larry, you might want to correct me if I'm wrong, but he talks about if you're a child and somebody hits you, how you contract in your body. And some of these people were holding that kind of response in their bodies for years and years. So we were kind of unraveling that and how they could manage that. And yes, it takes practice, but once they get it, then a seed has been planted, and they can grow that in their time and with their own choice. In terms of the aging, many of the people in my classes are queers in around my age, not all of them. It's a very mixed group of people. And I think that what's really pertinent is that and I say this constantly, you don't have to degenerate in all the ways that are expected as you get older. People say, oh, I've got this happening, I'm getting old. And I say, no, it doesn't have to happen necessarily. And we go through ways that we can explore some of the experiences that they're having may even be, you know, constraints imposed upon them physically, like sitting in bucket chairs while they're working, for example. So they end up like this, and they intelligently respond and habituate to that, and they don't have to, they can unravel that. But there are also strategies that we can use, like Bones for Life, which is an offshoot of Feldenkrais, where we are about, somebody who, I teach actors and dancers a lot, and musicians, somebody in an acting course said, you know, should I still be going to the gym? And I was like, well, and we had this big discussion about it. And he came up with this meme, which I have a big sign up in my studio now, which says, movement is strength. Strength is movement. He was a very young man. I think that the work that we do, it's not just about skeletal alignment. It's important, but we also work with strength. And we don't necessarily describe it that way all the time, but we're working with different muscle groups to work most efficiently, and so that you have strength. And also there's the internal, I don't know if strength is the right word, but internal capacity to feel comfortable in your skin. And that's the thing that we lose, and then we find it again. It happens all the time. I've got, you know, the chat here, I call it the bad guy, and I've got my good friend over here chatting to me as well, and I say, see you later, bad guy. I'm going to be strong. So I could go on and on, but I'll just pause there.
Could I just say one more thing? Thank you. That was, all of this is very useful. When you mentioned trauma, I think the thing that I said was a bit incorrect, because I talked about us in our physical bodies and things wearing out and injuries and all that as we get older. But the other thing about that is really happening now by my age-ish, my age group, is the trauma of loss. I talked to a friend who's a couple years, she's 74. She has lost 15 people with no family members in her lesbian community. And she lives in a small rural community in Nova Scotia. 15 people in the last year.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do to our bodies? So,
well, actually, I had the same thing. I had at the retreat, I had a grief counselor come and talk to me, and somebody who works with dementia. And we were just discussing the possibilities of how we could incorporate this work into that work. We didn't come to a conclusion, but somebody else may want to come in on that, because as you stated, sometimes because of who we are, we lose family, our biological families, and this becomes our family sometimes. So the people that we're connected to are our community. And losing them, of course, creates grief.
I'm moved to say something with regard to Ellen's question, which is not so much a solution to what I feel you saying about some of the issues we have, but one of the things that I love that makes me very proud to be queer is the radical tradition in queer communities that is sort of looking at how society marginalizes and what can be done about that and what movements can we build to push, maybe not push, to move towards new ways of organizing society. Oh, we've got to wrap up. Okay. But I think part of what I'm hearing you describe in both the grief, the loss, and some of the disconnects with the method or from the method or from our bodies and ourselves is like the massive new technologies that are vying for our attention, that are isolating us from each other, that are making a lot of money off of not feeling good in our bodies, etc. And those things are not just like natural things about life either. They've been created by people as well. And I see a lot of value in this work to help us form new communities and new ways of identifying those problems and working against them. And while we are often working on our own in the Feldenkrais method, it is a systems sort of understanding of the body that I think can be applied to other systems that we live inside of as parts of communities and parts of countries and nations and global communities, etc. So, yes. Okay.
You're muted, Frederick.
My apologies. We need to wrap up, but I see there are a couple of comments here and somebody who raised his hand before. Let's see what this says. It says, yeah, like Connor, I think this work needs to be part of a radical progressive social change. And I've heard that before and I agree. And any chance of someone, for example, Ellen, who's not a licensed Feldenkrais teacher, Ellen, I'd like to offer a holiday gift to you, to your friends, to your community. As you know, I have a membership program, and since I run it, I can offer some people some things, so we can talk about that. People want to come take class. I can't move to Western Canada, although I love Western Canada. I'm attached to my apartment. Also, I've been asked to see what I can do in terms of creating more practitioners. That's something that we really lack. That we just need more people doing this work, and it's just it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to become a practitioner. And yeah, so people have been reaching out to me about that, but that's another story. I noticed that Nigel had his hand up. Nigel, did you want to say something, and then we can go to Elizabeth, and then we can finish up?
I'll try and keep it really brief, but one of the things that I was thinking about throughout this fascinating discussion is the whole thing of generations. That if Moshe Feldenkrais was working now, if William Reich was working now, what would they be doing? How would they be responding to the way people have changed? And the other thing I'm thinking about is it's really interesting to have the views of the senior generation, and then there's the generation in the middle. But talking to the teenagers and the people who are in their early 20s, a lot of them are like, why should I decide to make a choice between being gay or being bi? They want options. They often want choices. And I think there's a lot of inspiration to be found also from that youth community, who a lot of them are rattling the bones of the older generation, some of my friends and their parents. But I think what strikes me and what I found in my own practice and training was that I was already comfortable as a gay man, but through my practice, I found huge freedom of discovering much more about myself and things that surprised me too. And I think that what we have to offer is really that the practice, know thyself, is this practice of freedom and practice of choices, and looking at that broad picture that for many people, it's really important that they are embraced by LGBT, but for others, It's like, I want to have, I mean, I've got friends who there are two women I know who are married, they've been married for years. And I said something to them about being gay. And they said, we don't think of ourselves as being gay. It was always just her. I met her and fell in love. So I've spoken longer than I meant to. It's been
The language
wonderful.
we use changes all the time, doesn't it?
Yeah. The language.
I've personally been in trouble for using the wrong language with different generations, but I'm learning.
Always a problem if the language is imposed from outside. It does change, but what works best, I think, is if it grows naturally from the inside and develops like a tree branches rather than it being something that's imposed.
You know, that,
Kenneth.
but sometimes outside is inside. For example, at Sage, the LGBT Elder Center, the word queer is not allowed because people who are 60 and above, like myself, have difficulty with that. I was in an interview with Margaret the other day. I recommend you listen to it. It was really quite good, if I say so myself, where I find for myself the word queer just does not roll off my tongue easily. I was a football playing jock, and queer was an insult that got drilled into me, and I absorbed it as such, and that's how it works in my vocabulary somewhere. I love the idea that the younger generation has turned around and claimed it and said, okay, we're throwing it back in your face, and this is who we are, and that's there, and I think it's great. It just does not roll off my tongue easily. And
And I think that older generation are allowed to continue to not feel happy with it.
right, and that's where
They
I
don't
am.
have to adapt if they don't want to.
But I think I'm in the middle where I want to respect the change, the fact that change takes place and that it's moving in the right direction, and also give myself I've been for decades. This is my reality, and so it's something that I'm playing with in terms of what do we do. I've had the experience. I only recently started doing a lot of work with the trans community, and I just didn't know the languaging at all. And people, as I was telling Margaret, people felt my heart even if I was saying the wrong thing or using words that were just not right. People could tell where I was coming from. Also, they had their guard up against me. But then once we engaged and once we connected human being to human being, there was a sense of, wait, okay, this is a good guy. He just doesn't realize you don't say that, or you. This is the better way of phrasing it. So. But I think if we come heart forward in a positive place and wishing others our best as we do, then the language falls into place, even if it's the younger generation asking me to do something that I'm not quite comfortable with, or people assuming political office, deciding they're going to run on an anti-trans platform. What does that mean for my life? I am there. I do want to honor everybody's time. I know Elizabeth had her hand up. She's been patiently waiting. Elizabeth, what would you like to say?
Very quick question for Maggie. What was the name of the town that your grandfather was in, that you were in when you were a child?
And me too, Brighton. You've got a Brighton area, haven't you? Brighton in the UK is a southern beach town.
Yes.
We have a Brighton beach here. That's also a beach.
Yeah. I don't know whether it was named after our beach. Our beach is not a fabulous beach. Our beach is a very stony beach. Stony beach, cold water. This is the UK.
There's a wonderful movie that was shot there, and I have a cold and my brain is made of cheese and I can't remember anything, but it's an
there's a few. Brighton Rock is the first real classic, but Quadrophenia was also filmed there, and I'm sure there's some others if I think about it hard enough.
If I come up with it, I'll send it along to you.
Oh, Mona Lisa.
No, it's about half an hour long. It's a dance movie. And it's got, disabled people in it and gay people in it and straight people in it and buskers on the boardwalk, and Love,
I feel like no, but I
love
don't.
after love. The song is something, 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 love after love. And I can't remember the name. Lloyd, somebody, I should know all this. I mean, I showed this movie to a class 7 years in a row,
Right.
but it has fallen out of my brain.
Ah.
A wonderful movie. We can go over.
Well, before we all fall out of our brains, we have been going for 7 days now. And Nigel, you've been here almost as much as I have.
I've
I
never
wa-
done as many lessons as today. I think today I did about 9 or
yeah,
something.
it's
I
been special.
feel
It's been really special.
extraordinary.
I want to thank the coordinators who really, if there's no way I could have done it without you guys, Maggie and Margaret, for making this happen, and also for the people who taught, who were here, who participated, because that was fantastic, including Larry, who's on the panel, who is always stepping forward to move things, to move life forward, and I want to thank him, and then I also want to thank all of you who came to be part of this. It would have been really boring if nobody showed up. So, and as a reminder, those who are able to make a contribution on the $200 level, you get the recordings of all of the lessons in the 24 hours around the world, and that helps us cover our costs. You can also, we have 3 beneficiaries. And let me mute those who are making sounds. We also have beneficiaries. If you look at my website, there are 3 extraordinary charities that do great work. And Janelle, who's my niece, who's here. In fact, Janelle, I'm going to spotlight you too. She says she's about to pass out because there she is. She's been working diligently in the background, telling me what I'm supposed to do. She's like, okay, how about this and how about that? And she also, unfortunately, had a tragedy in her circle of friends and had to leave for a while, but now she's back. And so I really want to take my hat off to her for helping to set things up. And again, thank you to everybody who's participated in this project. I hope to do it again. I hope to do it again. Not next week, but sometime.
Yes, not next week.
It won't be next week, but I don't know. I was thinking maybe during Feldenkrais week, which is happening, we could. Maggie, I want to talk to you about that. I don't want to have any conflict with other projects. So, but now that Cynthia's not doing this anymore, I think it'd be a good idea to do something during that time. And so I think it's really
Shay's birthday. That's when we do it.
yeah, that's great. And I see somebody saying Ellen. Larry, you're saying something about Ellen. What about Ellen DeGeneres? Oh, Ellen down here. Okay, hi, Ellen. I'm thinking, who's Ellen? Okay, all right, everybody. Oh, it seems sad to say goodbye to everybody, but it's not goodbye. It's a pause until we meet again the next time around. Thank you, everybody, for helping to make this happen. And wow, what a week! What a week! What a week! Have a good one, everybody. Take care of yourself. Take care of others. Bye bye now.
Bye.
Lovely to see you
Thank you
all.
so much,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye bye, everyone. Take care.